Yeah, and thanks, Colin. Mubarak for those who are celebrating Eid. And yeah, some colleagues couldn't join today. That's fine. So so today Francis will be giving us his perspective on Module 8. But before, I would like to ask Colin or Innocent if they have anything they want to mention before we start.
Maybe I go first. So Francis, I'm looking forward to your session today. You can tell us if you need more time. Colleagues, the faculty have been thinking about this a little bit in the background. And we'd like the tutorial sessions, to be a lot more interactive. So we've had some conversations with Francis in the background as to how he could potentially do that today. So no pressure, Francis, but I think we have a great session today. And we look forward to being able to learn together from each other based on the way you will lead us through today's session. At the end of the session, depending on how much of time is available, we can also talk a little bit about Paige. Thanks, Samir, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. So just to give a little bit more perspective, so how we see the tutorial is getting your input, your thinking, your comments, because the materials are there on Moodle. Everyone is expected to look at the material. So we don't expect you to rehash or retell us what's already known or what's on the material. We want to know your thinking, your ideas, whether you agree or disagree, whether there is new literature in the field that are relevant and that you found out that can add value to and help us improve the material. And yeah, hopefully we'll have some time after to talk about Paige. So we'll just to give us his perspective of this module. Then I will also give mine, and Innocent will bring in some covariate machine learning related techniques that he's been working on since last year. Before opening for everyone's question discussions. And so without delay, I would like to ask Francis to give us his input.
Thank you, Samir. Can you confirm that you hear me as I try to load?
Yes, we hear you well.
Okay. I have a million screens open, so let's try to. Do you see the slides I'm sharing?
Yes, we can see, Francis. Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thanks a lot once again, my colleagues. Thanks the faculty. As Colin and Samir did mention, I was guided to change a little bit the modality of administering the course, administering the short overview. I tried to do as much as I could, but I couldn't really reinvent any materials. So I'm going to use the materials that are on Module 8 on Moodle, but I'll try my best to focus it on the way I understood it and highlight rather a few areas that I would have felt like there should be more discussion. In doing so, I'm going to have to engage a lot my colleagues, the fellows, and I also have some open questions that hopefully I'll pass on to the faculty so that it can shape an interesting discussion. And as Colin mentioned, I hope that we really have a fruitful discussion today. Yes, so this is module 8, and the focus is on covariate model building. You will forgive me, or rather the materials that I downloaded, there seems to be a typo on the title page. I think this is universal because I've not changed anything. So really the focus is going to be an introduction to standard covariate model building approaches. Yes, so first of all, on Moodle, there are 3 sub-objectives. The first sub-objective is the general one. I'm showing the slides. It's the general aspects of covariate model building. It takes us through what covariates are, which different types of covariates there are, how to parameterize parameter covariate relations. The next, and it highlights different approaches for covariate modeling. The second objective has a focus on implementation. So it shows us one of the most widely used approaches for implementing covariate analysis within pharmacometrics, that is the stepwise covariate analysis. So it takes us through the implementation of SCM in different software interfaces. Phoenix NLME, it takes us through how it's done in non-MEM via the PSN functionality, and then how it's done in monoliths as well. And then the last aspect touches on one of, in my view, a very important aspects about covariate analysis, and that is interpretation of covariate effects. I think this deserves a little bit more attention because identifying a covariate as being statistically significant without communicating it in such a way that perhaps even a non-pharmacometrician understands the magnitude of the covariate effect. Without doing so, I think it waters down the relevance of pharmacometrics. So that is a very important topic, and I think I would already request Sabine maybe to, in his submission, try to focus a little bit more on that. I also try to do my best in doing so. So yes, so basically what I'm going to do here is to have a very general overview of covariate analysis, and then I'll bring in aspects that I think I found more interesting, that I think perhaps deserve further discussions. Feel free to interject if there is a question really. So I've stated the learning objectives. It starts right from the different methods for covariate analysis. And really it ends at highlighting or giving an interpretation of covariate effects that have been identified. Okay, so the outline is not going to be the overwhelming focus because I won't go through each bit by bit. But I think we've had the word covariates already several times in our different projects. So the question is, what are covariates and why are they important? So if you may beg from a more standard definition, so covariates are observed factors that correlate with drug exposure in patients. For example, renal function, body weight, age, sex, genetic polymorphism, and the likes. But a more generalizable definition goes beyond drug exposure alone, because you could also have covariates on pharmacodynamic outcome rather than looking at pharmacokinetics. For example, if you're looking at a pharmacodynamic response, change in the biomarker, or looking at overall survival, you could have covariates which are associated with those measures. So it doesn't need to be pharmacokinetic per se. So broadly speaking, you have 2 broad categories of covariates: those which are extrinsic to the individual that is being studied. And in these aspects, you talk about things like, if you're talking about PK, you're talking about, for example, drug-drug interactions, some habits, environmental factors, and the likes. And then you have intrinsic covariates, which are characteristics or attributes specific for an individual that are measured, and this could influence the outcome that is being measured. There are various categories of covariates, ranging from continuous covariates, binary. Continuous covariates are those scaled in nature. So they take on numerical values from a minimum to a maximum, and they are not discretized. So you have binary covariates, which basically have two categories. And then you have categorical ones, which are not ordered, for example, race. And then you have categorical ones, which are ordered. For example, random function, you may have those who have poor, intermediate, moderate, and the likes. And then you have covariates that could be time dependent, or even those which are omics. There's something that sometimes you see with covariates and the way they are handled, is that a continuous covariate can be transformed into a categorical covariate. Often this is due to the lack, if you do not have a distribution of covariates quite uniform across the entire range, sometimes you categorize what essentially is a continuous covariate. Whereas this might make the analysis somewhat simpler, you lose a lot of information by doing this, because you lose this continuous scale on which the covariate was initially measured. So it is something that personally I wouldn't really advocate for so much. Now, it's very important to highlight some very key considerations from what has been published in the guidelines. We have the EMA guideline, we have the FDA guideline, and I'm going to add to this something that I just came across. I think something like 2 months ago, the ISOP committee did publish a document on covariate analysis. I have the link that I'm dropping right now within the chat for our personal reviews. So I found it very simple to read, because it gives very nicely the different steps that one would partake in covariate analysis. And I think, unlike the guidance documents, which focus on the entire aspects of a pharmacometrics project, here you can get that one, it focuses almost entirely on just covariate analysis and the prerequisites that need to come with covariate analysis. So yes, I've seen Samir has already shared this. So I think that's a must add to the materials for the next year. But some of the principles that we will focus on is, when you're doing covariate analysis, before even going to covariate analysis, you need to understand the data and very well. Look at the data graphically, look at the data numerically, so that you know which covariates are there and what their distribution are. Do you have time varying covariates? Do you have on the baseline covariate? These are things that you need to understand prior to doing any form of covariate analysis. When it comes to the covariate distributions, if they are categorical covariates, look at the difference within a specific covariate. Last week, we did show that for our case, the data we have is predominantly Caucasian. It's predominantly Caucasian patients, the tumor size data we have. And we have the Black Americans, the Hispanics, and the other races contributing less than 10% to that data set. Now, these are things that are important in deciding which covariate one would then focus on, and how to handle this kind of a covariate. When it comes to continuous scaled covariates, you do not only focus on looking at maybe the median distribution, or where the maximum and where the minimum is. You have to look at the interquartile range. Where do you have most of the data for that continuous covariate? Because it affects the way you ultimately use the covariate in the analysis. There are aspects that Samir did mention in the last presentation, and these are aspects of deciding which covariates are relevant to include in a covariate analysis. First of all, the covariate analysis has to be fit for purpose. You kind of have a research question before you even develop the model, and you're trying to address a specific research question. So you may find a scenario where there is shrinkage. coming from the base model developed. You don't have enough data, and hence a lot of your individual values are more skewed towards the population values. So these are things that one should look at. And of course, the view is that shrinkage will affect your ability to identify relevant coverage, but when you do a likelihood ratio test, it doesn't necessarily affect how you look at that information. Now, this is the part that deserves a lot of effort, actually. There are a lot of new covariate modeling approaches that are being developed. And it is a bit difficult to keep up pace with all of them because they all have quite unique attributes. The very common ones and quite widely used, we have a stepwise covariate modeling. And I stand to be corrected, but I think the full covariate modeling approach is also quite widely used. But as you see from the list here, there are several other approaches, SEM+, LASSO, and then some of the analysis approaches, which are maybe more geared towards machine learning approaches. For example, those who are working with machine learning, I think Safa and the team. So the methods are very many, and what I'm going to try and focus on is to maybe have us discuss the major differences between stepwise covariate analysis and the full covariate modeling. I did come across a page poster in 2011 that looked into detail, a page poster by, I think, Mark Gaston guy. It looked very much into detail on what the possible benefits of the full covariate modeling approach would be over stepwise covariate modeling. And I think maybe we deserve to discuss this somehow more. Okay, so when it comes to interpreting covariate effects, simulations are powerful tools. And this is something that I'm going to very briefly demonstrate what is covered in the materials, what it means by interpreting covariate effects based on simulations. So we've talked about implementation of covariate effects, but if we look at it from the perspective of having the model, having an outcome measured, and introducing a covariate effect in the model, how might this look like rather? So in a very simple regression sense, you have an outcome that you're measuring. This could be concentration if we are looking at a PK. And then we have basically parameters. Here we are looking at parameter value, but in essence, you're looking at parameters. And then you have different covariates that might affect the outcome through an interaction with the parameter. I want to specifically highlight that whereas we look at these predictors or these covariates usually independently, it's often that a combination of covariates will ultimately affect the outcome. And that is why covariate analysis is often not a one-step process, but it's a step about understanding the influence of very many different covariates on an outcome. And there are different strategies for implementing this. If you look at the example where they say clearance, for example, can be given via an intercept parameter, for example, and then you have treatment, and then you have weight as potential factors or predictors or covariates. Or more specifically, you have clearance equals to 5 liters per hour, and then you have covariate effects added to it. For example, ketoconazole, the effect of ketoconazole being measured if it is given, or effect of subject weight. And you have basically a covariate effect parameter estimated, and this is what we have in the brackets here. So this expression shows you the outcome and how covariates affect that outcome. For this instance, we have clearance being the outcome. It's really a parameter, not really PK, but it's clearance, which is the parameter, and it shows how clearance is affected by different covariates. And as I said, really beyond PK, it could also be pharmacodynamics. For example, you could have the rate at which the patients are dying within a population if you're thinking about an oncology trial, and then you have different factors that affect that rate. It doesn't need to be necessarily PK. So I'm going to use this slide to maybe bring in my colleagues a bit in this discussion. So if we take the example of clearance, we did talk about and within a base model, what you will have, a base PK model, you'll have, for example, clearance equals to the typical value of clearance. And then you have a random effects term implemented on it within the PK model context. So the way you would include a covariate in this model would be, clearance. For this instance, we're talking about body weight. You have clearance, so you have the typical value of clearance multiplied by the covariate value. And then you have the covariate effect parameter, what is captured as a D clearance, D body weight. So this is the covariate effect parameter. And then still you have the random effect term added to it. Now this tells us a number of about how covariates are typically implemented within the pharmacometric circles. One, the covariate effect is not implemented directly on the outcome, for example, not on concentrations, but rather it's implemented on the parameters of the pharmacokinetic model. So in this case, you have body weight affecting clearance, not affecting the concentration of the drug. Another thing is we see that body weight BW is divided by 70. This is the concept of centering covariate effects. And in most cases, the 70 here will stand for the median body weight. The question I would like to pose is, why is it necessary, or why is it useful to center while evaluating covariate effects? And then we see that we do not only have the covariate value or the covariate distribution, but we rather have a covariate effect term estimated here. And we are using a specific formulation for this model. What is this model formulation? What is the parameter covariate relation here? I need to introduce the concept of parameter covariate relation because it is very widely also used when we are talking about the approaches for covariate modeling. So I'm going to open up the discussion a bit. I'm not sure I see the chat properly, but I'll call on someone just to kind of give input. So first of all, why is it important to center covariates? And here, remember, we are looking at a continuous scaled covariate like body weight. Why do you think it is important to center the covariates during the covariate evaluation? Yes, Mwila, your hand is up. Go for it.
Okay, yeah. So my thinking is that it makes it easier to interpret that covariate effect, and also makes it easier like to compare with other models. So if for instance your covariate of weight is, you put maybe average of 70 kg, it's easier like for me to state that, okay, in an average person weighing 70 kg, this is the effect. So it is easier or even meaningful if I have to compare it with other studies also where they've centered the covariate. So it's for easy it's for easy it's easier to interpret it.
Thank you very much,
speak.
Mwila. Thank you very much. Do we have any further comments to this apart from what Mwila said? Any further comments? Cassius, what do you think?
Hi, Francis, thanks. So I also support Moila's answer. So, but I have like a question actually regarding the whole equation. Like, I've seen that when they use the continuous covariate, like in most cases, okay, from the paper that I've seen, like they didn't include the random effect. So Is it always a case that like one should include the random effects or
Thank you. Thank you, Cassius. Yes, and I'm going to touch on that. Let's first very quickly finish with the question, but I'm going to touch on that. I see Ali's hand is up. Ali, and then Safa, and then maybe we'll try to wrap up with the discussion. I know there are a lot of hands up, but in the interest of time, let's keep it Ali and then Safa. Ali, go for it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your very nice interpretation. So the centering is needed. Well, I'm not in disputing what Mueller has said, but just to rephrase it in other words, like the centering is important if inference is wants to be made to determine the group effect of that particular covariate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Safa?
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I agree with Moila, and also like for example for the effect of the body weight when you want to see the range, like if for example like you are divided by the median, so you are avoiding as it was mentioned with in the recordings, you are avoiding like you are making more sense of the of your data or of your results. So it's like, for example, here you are avoiding to have like intercept like to be 0, which doesn't make sense. Like, so you are making more sense of the data that you have.
Thank you, Safa. And I think you've touched on one of the critical points, that is interpretability of the covariate effect itself. It's more intuitive to say this is the change in clearance relative to the typical patient. But in the process of doing so, because you're looking at the median kind of gives you a point where you have sufficient data about the population. It also stabilizes the model when you're doing the covariate evaluation. So that's an added numerical advantage of actually centering the covariate to the median value. Yes, Ali did ask, in equations, typically from his observation, they typically leave out the random effect component. Well, I mean, when you're evaluating covariate effect, actually what you're trying to do is to see whether the covariate does explain the random effect. So a covariate effect model, if the base model had a random effect, then there should be an eta term attached to it that actually captures the random effect. So this is something that maybe in the equation you saw it was implied rather than explicitly added there. And Samir, maybe you can note this and help us clarify a bit later on.
Yeah, I just want to add, like everything said is very important. Also, you mentioned the model is more stable, so we can prove it numerically that the algorithm will be much like more streamlined when you are estimating coefficient where there is a data. If you go one more slide, so when we don't center, it's like your intercept is at weight 0, yeah, this is plot. So where there's no data below 30, so it's very, you can have unstable fitting, while when you center, this really you are estimating what is the clearance value at weight equals 70, where you have a lot of data, that's your median. So things can be much easier to estimate when you center. And things become even more important when you have multiple covariates and multiple, covariate effects on multiple parameters. And then, okay, you can reason about what is the meaning of the coefficient, while if you don't center, it's like, okay, this coefficient when all the covariates are 0, which is not physiologic. There is no patient with 0 all across the board for all covariates. So that's also good to think about.
Thank you very much, Samir. And the next question I had on this slide was this covariate effect. What is this parameter covariate relation? I want to focus on this because it's going to be the template for the other discussions. So what is this parameter covariate relation we have in this model? Maroti, do you want to give this a try?
I would like to, but I was typing my comment as I was listening to Samia speaking about multiple, if you have multiple covariates and stuff. So if you could you please just repeat your question so that I can gather my thoughts quickly and respond to that?
Yes, so maybe you could vocalize the comment you were typing in for the benefit of everyone.
Oh, I think one of the benefits if you send her, sometimes it tends to reduce the multicollinearity in the sense that in a case whereby you have interactions in terms of evaluating interacting covariates, obviously you would have that particular variable related to itself. So meaning that if you include the covariate and the interaction, you would find that they are highly correlated, and that might distort your estimates rather, perhaps even change the direction. So if you center, you are likely not to experience the multicollinearity.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So the question I had is, we have here a parameter covariate relation. And what I'm asking is, which functional form is our parameter covariate relation in this model? So we have clearance equals the typical value of clearance. We have body weight in brackets, and then we have a power function, basically. So this is a power relation. I'm highlighting this specifically because if you look at the materials, there are very many different other forms of parameter covariate relations. This is just one of the examples. So we have the linear parameter covariate relation. We have the exponential parameter covariate relation. So you would have a different mathematical expression of that kind of relationship between the parameter and the covariate. We have other more complex ones like the hockey stick relation within non-mem, exponential, linear. And this is when we're talking about continuous covariate. So what is shown here is just one of the examples. There are some advantages to using a power relation. It lends itself to being quite stable. It's intuitive. It can easily be converted into an exponential relation or a linear relation. So it is a very flexible parameter covariate relation to use when it comes to covariate model development. But there are other forms of parameter covariate relations that can be explored as well. Now, in the next slide, this is something closely aligned to what Ali did ask. So if you look at the distribution of your eta values, looking at a scenario where you have a base model, down here we have typical value of clearance times the random effects. So you have eta against the covariate. We see that there's a trend. We see that there's a trend as eta increases, the covariate also increases. Now, once you have accounted for the impact of this covariate cov error, which is body weight in this case, onto the base model, if you've developed the covariate model, ideally, the relationship between eta and the covariate should disappear because you've already explained the variability due to the covariate, which is body weight in that case. So in a sense, you would say that the reason we include covariates into a model is to explain the inter-individual variability in, for example, the pharmacokinetics in one patient compared to the other. And of course, from a more mechanistic perspective, you can imagine that specific patient attributes is what leads to the difference of one patient differing from the second patient. So I'm not going to go so deep into the next slides, but the point that I'm trying to make is that you have very many different model formulations for parameter coverage relations. And these differ for continuous coverages compared to those which are categorical coverage. So what I'm going to show here is the case where we have categorical coverage. We did look at examples of categorical coverage. For example, they could be binary. For example, you're looking at sex, male versus female. They could be categorical. You're looking at Caucasian, Asian, blacks. So depending on which categorical coverage you have, you can measure, you can quantify the impact of that coverage on a specific parameter. And there are different ways of formulating the parameter coverage relations when it comes to categorical coverage. But what you see quite commonly used is the exponential relation. Though like for continuous coverage, you can also use the linear relation in order to categorize the coverage effects of one of the categories relative to a different category. So for categorical coverage, you have sort of an on and off switch. So it's more like you take one coverage category to be your reference, and the reference is often the coverage that has the more abundant distribution, and then you measure the coverage effect of the second category relative to the reference category. So this gives an example of categorical coverage where you're looking at the implication on clearance. So basically you have the coverage categories. You have EM status 1 and EM status 2. These are categorical coverages. And I think in this sense, we are talking about extensive metabolizers. So you could say clearance is given by a scenario where you have the typical value, and then you measure additively, rather, you measure relative to the typical value, the coverage effect of being status 1, the coverage effect of being in status 2. Or you could decide to parameterize in such a way that you measure coverage effects of all the three statuses, 0, 1, and 2. In the first sense, you take the typical value as being the category 0. Okay, so there's really a lot to say about covariate evaluation, but we cannot go entirely into details of this. I see the chat is very active. I don't know if I need to stop so that some discussion takes place, or Samir, can you guide me? Or I can continue.
Yeah, so can you, so here, basically, depending on how you parameterize your model, the meaning of the parameters are different. So first, we have clearance equal typical value of clearance times the effect when EM equal 1 and the effect when EM equal 2. So to know what is the clearance for those that are not EM equal 1 or 2, so EM equals 0, so you just remove the rest of the equation. So here, as an example, clearance equal 5. That's when EM equal 0. Now, when EM equal 1, you need to multiply 5 times 0.5 because EM equal 2, this coefficient cancel out. So then clearance when EM equal 1 is 5 times 0.5, which is 2.5. So the next way, you don't have to compute anything because it's already multiplied. Basically, the coefficient is now not an effect, but it's a clearance value. That's why the name as well it's not DCLEM, it's called CL, the clearance for EM equal 1. So here the parameter estimated will be immediately clearance for EM equals 0.5, EM equal 1, 2.5, EM equal to 1.25. So it's really important, and I below I showed this snapshot of how you would code it in, say, if statement, typically use a non-mem. So I want to draw your attention here, depending on what software you are using. Sometimes the interface lock you in, okay, You can only have the coefficient or the equation written in a specific way, unless you choose, okay, not to use the interface and go code it. So, so yeah, you need to be careful. If you are looking for a specific parameterization, you can just code it in your tool. You don't have to be constrained of what like the Monolix interface is forcing you to have, or the Phoenix interface. You can go into your model code and code it.
Thanks, Sami. So there's a lot of flexibility on how this can be implemented. And as I mentioned earlier, you can actually have more than one covariate on a specific parameter. For example, you can have body weight as a parameter, a significant parameter on clearance, and you can also have EM as a significant parameter on on clearance. So, and that is why it's very important to then look at what are the covariate building strategies. Mwila, your hand is up. Please vocalize.
Oh, yes. I've got a question on the continuous covariate.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
we've been talking about like what has been recommended is to center the covariate, say, for instance, body weight maybe 70 kgs. Now, my question is, in a case where you have maybe a population of, say, 100 people, then you administer the drug and their weights, maybe it's the highest is 60 kg, and then the lowest is maybe 58 kgs. Then my question is, during your modeling, you discover that actually weight is not having any effect. Then you estimate your clearance. So how can you interpret the clearance? Like, which weight are you going to refer to it? Is it the lowest, the highest, or the average?
Let me try to respond, and then Samir can come in. Yes, so the purpose of doing the covariate analysis is to find out whether, in this case, weight affects clearance. And if you find out that it doesn't, then in your model, you wouldn't include weight as a covariate, because from the evaluation, it doesn't affect clearance. So there's no rationale really for including it in the model. Regardless of whether you've centered it or not, there's no rationale for including it in the model. I don't know if that answers really what you've said, but if there's no effect of the covariate, then you don't include it in the model.
So yeah, just to add, so and Muila, please add. So you have a very narrow, say, weight range in your population, as I understood. So of course you might not see a true weight effect. It's just a limitation of your data where you have a very narrow range. So what you can say is, in my weight range, I didn't see a weight effect. Just so if you estimate your coefficient, it would be probably near zero. It is saying, okay, it's like multiplying by 1 is a power of 0 is 1. So yeah, there is no weight effect in this very narrow range. That's possible because you didn't cover a wide range of body weights. So that's, I would say, good enough to describe what's going on in your current population. Now, if you want to extrapolate to lower body weight or larger body weight, that becomes a different story. The current data don't allow you to extrapolate. You don't have this data. So you need to rely on theory, whether it's allometric theory or more mechanistic ones. Okay, bringing in, okay, well, what would be the weight effect outside of the current range? That becomes an extrapolation exercise. So you can come up with a model that's based on literature, on what we know about the drug, PBPK, whatever it is. You are using outside information to extrapolate beyond the data range. So it's a different exercise.
Okay, yes, so my question was, once you've noticed that the weight has no any effect, but you've ended up estimating clearance and volume of distribution. So what would be your units like of volume of distribution? Like, of course it's liters, but is it going to be liters per kg or liters per watt? Because you did not have any, I mean, the weight did not have any effect on those parameters. But when you are translating that pick a parameter, are you going to state that this parameter refers to a person with such kind of a weight in a case where you've got very narrow weight ranges? Like, how can you interpret your parameters?
Well, the unit of your parameter are in, say, depending, but let us say most common in clearance, liter per hour, not liter per hour per kg, and same for volume. Volume is in liter. So in this equation, say, I'm looking at the screen here, there's a weight equation. Clearance equal typical value of clearance times body weight in kg over 70 kg. So this is unitless. So body weight over 70, it's kilogram over kilogram. So it becomes unitless. So typical value of clearance is in liter per hour. That's the unit. Now, if you want to say standardize or you want to report it by kg, that's, I would say, a common practice, but it is somewhat flawed because this relationship is not linear. When you say clearance equal, say, 5 liter per hour per kilogram, implicitly you are saying it's linear with body weight. It's per kilo. So no matter what kilo range or unit you have, it's linearly increasing down or up. And that's false. It's a power model. It's saturating. So you should not do it, say, when you have a power model to say it's by kilogram. Sometimes you do it because across species, especially in translational work, you want a common, you want to normalize because body weight of, say, mice and rat and dog are widely different. So you want some type of more standardized units. But this is not dependent on how you code your model or how you use your covariate. It's more translational. And many times we don't even have weight of mice. We use an average mice weight from what we know about the species we are using, or average dog weight, and we normalize the whole thing. It's not really dependent on how you used your model or how you or weight as covariate on your model.
Thank you, Samir. Mwila, I hope that answers the question. Does it?
Yes, yes, yeah, it answers
Yes,
the question.
Samir, I have some follow-up questions. So the scenario that Mwila did mention, the distribution is very narrow and we don't see any effect. Is it good practice to then go ahead and do, within that population, do some kind of allometric scaling, or you would only do it actually when you want to do an extrapolation? And secondly, there are scenarios where, due to the narrow distribution, you can actually estimate a statistically significant effect of weight. However, the precision with which you estimate that covariate effect parameter is poor. So to say it's above 30%, which is the rule of thumb for a good estimate of a covariate effect. Would you retain that as a covariate effect to keep in the model?
It will depend on the intended use of the model and why do you insist on having covariate or weight effect. Like depends how you will use it later on. Again, are you extrapolating to outside range or not? But yeah, you depending on what you are. Sometimes we fix the weight coefficient to say allometric clearance 0.75. Of course, depending whether we have small molecule, what kind of drug, whether it makes sense. But yeah, sometimes we realize there is not enough data to estimate this coefficient. So we just fix it to a literature value. There is a lot of publication out there from Nick Holford and many others, where they show that it's very hard unless you have very wide range of body weight. It's very hard to estimate the power coefficient with proper precision. So many times you will see people using fixed allometric scaling component and estimate it as known. So and when we have enough data, sometimes we say, okay, we compare a model with fixed allometric exponent to one where we estimate, and oh, great, we estimated power of weight of 0.8. This is very close to theoretical value. But yeah, it really depends on the application, what you are using the model for later down the road.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that really highlights, what this highlights is you can have a parameter in the model and you have more than one coverage on, but it is not very straightforward whether you keep the coverage in or not within this parameter coverage relation. There are a lot of additional factors you need to look at. As Mila did highlight about the distribution of the coverage, how precisely the covariate effect is estimated, the intended use of the model. So there's a lot of judgment that needs to still be made in the process of doing the covariate analysis. Okay, so there is a demo tutorial here. I won't go into the details, but basically this highlights the steps that were taken based on the model. Data was simulated, and then an SCM procedure was implemented based on this data. And what you typically expect after doing covariate analysis, if you look at this plot here, you have on your left, you have a plot of how the eta values do align across different covariate values. So you have, for categorical covariates, you have the box plots. You see that category 1, for example, has a higher, the distribution is on the higher side compared to category 0. And if you look at the continuous covariate in weight in this sense, you see that there seems to be a trend towards higher etas for weight. If you fit the model and do the covariate analysis, you do expect that you no longer see the trends in covariate, in parameter, rather in eta covariate relations anymore. And as such, you could say that the covariates have explained the random effects, if you have covariates which are informative, that is. So I want to bring in, first of all, to highlight the stepwise covariate model building approach. So a lot of work has been done on this, but also we have the full covariate modeling approach. So these are two which are highlighted here, but I think they also deserve a little bit more discussion. The principles that these two do take in are a little bit different. And I think you'll find different uses of these two approaches. I've seen quite typically most pharmacokinetic projects do stepwise covariate model building. But if you look at people who are working with oncology data, for example, if they have survival as an endpoint, I think the most common way of implementing baseline covariates is by doing a full covariate model. So it's worth maybe spending some more time looking at these two approaches. Samir, I don't know if you have that paper from Mark Gaston guy, the page paper that you could share in the platform. I have the link, but I may not be able to share it right now. But basically, this is what happens in the process of doing a covariate analysis. You have different components of model development. Develop the deterministic component of the model, that's the structural model. Then you add random effects, and then you have the final base model developed. And the base model developed is the basis of developing the covariate model. So the covariate model building process is based on the base model. So once you've partaken the different stages of base model development, and you have a base model that you think is satisfactory enough from your goodness of fit plots and maybe running a VPC as well, then you can proceed to the step of covariate model building. Okay, so the stepwise covariate model building approach has two main steps. We have the forward step, and then we have the backward step. In some instances, the two steps, you have the forward inclusion step, and then you have the backward deletion step. So one of the key assumptions is that while you're doing the covariate inclusion, each subsequent covariate model you build is can be compared to the previous base model using the likelihood ratio test, what we typically refer to as nested models. So basically, you take your set of covariates, and then for that set of covariates, you univariately evaluate each covariate on a specific pre-specified parameter. And then after evaluating univariately all those parameter covariate relations, you find out which of the parameter covariate relations best leads to an improvement in model fit. And you're going to take that parameter covariate relation and you use it as the base model for the starting step for the next step of your forward inclusion step. So I'm going to show you an example, basically based on the data that we have here. So this is a summary of an SCM procedure. So we have, and I think this is coming from probably Phoenix. Yeah, so we have different steps. You have one shown up to around step 20 here. So you have in the first, what is in line 2 here, step 00, you have the base model that has been fit. This base model doesn't have covariates. It doesn't have covariates. So basically when you fit the model, you have the objective functional value, which is the negative twice the log likelihood, but you also have different methods of evaluating numerical fit, AIC and BIC. But let's focus on the log likelihood for here. So you have different parameters. For this model, we have the parameters EM and we have the parameters patient, which is PAT. So in the first step, we evaluated clearance on EM, rather EM on clearance. And then fitting this model, we have an objective function value output. And then we have patient on volume, and then you have patient on clearance, and then you have weight on volume. And then we have weight on clearance. So if you look at this first step that is highlighted in green here, and you look at the objective function values, you see that what is highlighted is for patient on volume, we have an objective function value of, that is 19,806 minus 19,806. So if we look at all these other relations which have been fit in the first step, this would qualify as the best fit in terms of drop in objective function value. This is the best fit in terms of drop in objective function value. And as such, in the second step, which starts from line 8, our new base model is one where you have the patient status on volume as being our starting base model. And we do a reevaluation of the previous parameter covariate relations, taking this as our new base model. So this is something that is done iteratively. You see that in the next step, we have EM on clearance as being the best improvement in model fit. That means we are going to have in the subsequent model, which starts in line 12, we have EM on clearance, and then we have patient on, we have patient on volume, and then, I beg your pardon, we have EM on clearance, and then patient on volume as our starting point. And then we re-evaluate again. So this is done iteratively until we reach a point where we cannot add with statistical significance any further covariate within the forward inclusion step. And then once we have a final model from the forward inclusion step, For example, we can have EM on clearance, patient on volume, a patient on clearance, and then we have weight on clearance. Then we go through the backward elimination step, where we remove each of the covariates univariately. We remove them and we see the impact this has on model fit. So if removing a covariant leads to significant worsening of model fit, then we say that covariate cannot be removed. We retain it within the model. So we have two steps: forward inclusion and backward elimination. And the goal is, in the forward inclusion, we look for covariates that can be included in the forward step. Usually this follows a less stringent criteria, highlighting a p-value of about 0.05, which is very commonly used. And then the backward elimination step takes in a more stringent criteria. For example, taking a p-value of 0.01 as a criteria for covariate significance. Okay, so I've used the SCM output here to highlight the process of SCM. Please look at the material that is on Moodle. It gives a very nice overview of the different ways of implementing SCM in non-MEM, in Phoenix, and in Monolix as well. The second covariate building approach that I wanted to highlight is the full covariate modeling approach. So basically, unlike SCM, where you univariately include covariates, depending on which one provides statistical significance at a certain point, in full covariate model, you determine which covariates you want to include in the model a priori. So you look at the covariates you have in the data set, and then based on clinical relevance and based on the lack of collinearity between the covariates, you decide which covariates you want to include in the model. And then you jointly evaluate the covariate effects in the model. And according to the presentation at Page, the discussion was a lot around whether statistical significance actually means, let me put it the other way. Is it possible that a covariate can be not statistically significant, but have a clinically relevant impact on any outcome? So a lot of the discussion was built around, you can actually add covariates within the model, even though they are not statistically significant, as long as they bring about some potential clinically relevant impact on whichever outcome you're measuring. So I thought maybe we would spend some time to look at the merits of using the stepwise covariate modeling approach versus the full covariate modeling approach.
Yeah, we already spent more than an hour, so maybe you should take a small break.
Okay,
Any final comment or quick question before we break? Okay, no, I don't hear anyone. So let us take a
I
break.
put up my hand.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Muila.
Okay, yes. My question on the covariate modeling. So my question is, in a case where maybe I'm just going to give an example. If, say, for instance, weight is a significant covariate of PK, but you also find that weight is also a significant covariate of PD. So in that case, is it wise to include weight both on PK and PD parameter, or it's just enough just to include it on PK since it is related to PD as well? That's my question. I don't know whether you've understood it.
Yes, it's a good question. I think I can take it after this break and continue with our discussion.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Thank you, Samir. Yeah.
No problem.
Okay, so Samir, guide us. How long will the break take?
Let's reconvene at quarter past the hour.
Quarter past
Yeah.
the hour. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
We can continue. So just before the break, Muina had a good question. Basically, we have a PK and a PK/PD type of model, and we have covariate. Using weight as an example, we have a covariate that affects the PK, but maybe this covariate also affects the PD independently from the PK. So for example, we all know body weight influence the PK clearance, so it's very expected that our PK exposure depend on body weight. Now, many times the weight effect on the PD cancels when we already have included it on the PK, but sometimes it still has an impact. So we need to think, do we have a physiological understandings that can explain this? Maybe, for example, I don't know, we have atopic dermatitis indication, and we are trying to target receptors on the skin. And if you have a larger body weight, you have a larger skin surface and more receptors, so more PD target. So you will still see a weight effect on your PD in general. So that's not, say, unheard of, that a covariate can influence both PK and PD. Now we need to be careful, because as the model becomes more complex and the chain of events, you need to decide. It's not the software that will decide. You as a pharmacometrician will decide, okay, what influenced what. You need kind of causal diagram that makes sense from pathology and physiology. And then, okay, you fit the model that is justified. So covariate affecting multiple aspect of the model, things can become like hard to identify. You need to decide, okay, what is the chain of events, what's influencing what, and then you fit a model that makes sense. So I hope that give you some pointers, Mila.
Yeah, yes, thanks very much. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. So yeah, I can cover the communication of covariate effects, but so maybe I can share my screen, and we still have to
Samir,
give. Yeah,
Samir, Ali's hand is up. I don't know. Maybe it's
yeah,
related to
please go
the
ahead.
dashboard.
Yeah, before opening a new topic, let us make sure we answer all questions.
Okay. Thank you, Samir, and the faculty for taking us through the presentation. My question is based on what Francis has said earlier in choosing while doing the stepwise covariate modeling. For instance, if one has added weights on clearance and then adding that covariate resulted to having, resulted to improving the model by having lower likelihood and acceptable RSE, but then the parameter estimate that was gotten was something that is not in keeping with what is known about the drug in the literature. So in this instance now, would one still keep this covariate as significant, or you would have to, ignore despite the significance it has? soon.
So, if I understand, you found a covariate that doesn't make sense. Like
A
it
covariate,
is significant.
a covariate that has improved the model, but the resulting parameter estimate is not in keeping with what is known about the drug in literature.
Yeah, so that's, I would say, a typical example of what we call confounded effect. Say you are estimating effect of, I don't know, body weight, and you found a very weird effect value. It turns out all the high body weight patient also had the renal dysfunction. So in reality, it's not body weight effect. It's something else going on, but it was confounded and correlated with something you don't know about. Sometimes we know about, like you have it in your database. Sometimes we don't even know. It is not even in your database as a covariate. Genotype, weird disease, you don't even know. But what you see, oh, it's an unexpected effect of body weight. So yes, it's a limitation of your current data, and you need to think about what's going on. Like if you have a body of evidence suggesting otherwise, yeah, it can happen that you have collected the data that is confounded and that's giving you weird results. You need to look what's going on, see if you can find an explanation. And that's not like no model out there will help you. It's really more about understanding your drug and what's going on.
Yeah, Samir, just to
yeah.
share an experience, I think it's a case of actually understanding your data. I remember there's a time I had a logistic regression model that was telling me that the risk of toxicity increased with reduction in dose. So when you lowered the dose, the risk of toxicity increased. And that didn't make sense because you'd expect it to be the other way around. But when I looked at the data closely, I realized that this was a dose adaptation study. It had a dose adaptation within the frame of the study. So as the patients stayed long on treatment, they got the toxicity, but the doses were being reduced across time. In that case, you would have a scenario where you're looking at reduction in doses coinciding with an increase in the adverse effect. So it's a case of then model misspecification. That model was not ideal for this kind of data. So I think understanding the data sometimes helps a lot to kind of clear out this kind of observations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. That's a good example.
Thank you.
So, okay, I will share my screen. So,
Yeah, and Samir, maybe somewhere in your submission, if you could give a word or two on these, the two general covariate modeling approaches, SCM and the full covariate modeling approach. I don't know
yeah,
if you've used the
absolutely.
two
Okay,
widely.
yeah.
And
Yeah, if you can stop sharing, I will. Okay. And yeah, you can see my screen. Also, while I believe I sent several papers that I would say published lately. So let me highlight that ISO paper. So here, what's good is that with this new paper, newer, say, so they mentioned the full model, full. yeah, so Blaster, etc. But I would highly recommend that you read this paper, especially what we call now a full fixed effects model, and its counterpart, FRAM, the full random effect model. And basically, they had a nice table on comparing its approach and yeah, the FFEM and FRAM, etc. So I would say in the statistical literature, it is common knowledge that stepwise covariate approaches are suboptimal and not to be recommended. We often use it in pharmacometrics because we don't have something better, because it's straightforward and automated and let us say no-brainer. Not really no-brainer, because as you do it in software, any software, Phoenix, Monolix, PSN, etc., the procedure can fail and cannot proceed. Basically, you have a local minimum and your stepwise algorithm would not choose the optimal model. It will continue anyways, and you have to fix it later on. It's very time consuming, very frustrating. So yeah, it is to some extent automated, but not foolproof. Then you have to do it manually and spend a long time. So that's why I in the methods we covered. Let me find it. So here, no, what's the slide where we have the methods? Yeah, it's this one. Yeah. So also not to forget that I included, so now we have the PyDarwin of this world where you have the genetic algorithm applied to non-mem and Phoenix and NME. I also mentioned the full random FRAM and mentioned Monolix methods, the Cossacks and Samba. But yeah, I would say most commonly used are the stepwise and the full model. And now more and more we see like newer methods, even the FRAM and so on. So basically what's going on is that you know what might affect, say, clearance volume Ka. So you have two approaches. One is you test it iteratively, or you fit the full model. Basically, you fit a saturated model, all effect on your parameter, and then you let the model tell you whether this effect is relevant or not. And you don't have any stepwise procedure in this procedure. But the challenge is making this full model converge and fit, because it is saturated, so it is over-parameterized. So it's very hard for us to fit it. So, but yeah, it is feasible. We use it all the time. So personally, I prefer the full model approach because it let me answer clinical questions that are relevant, because in every drug label, we need to answer whether, okay, do we have a renal function effect, hepatic function effect, a race effect? So if you are using stepwise, you can say, oh, I tested race in my models, there's no effect. Trust me on it. I don't show like a coefficient. While in a full model approach, say, oh, race is part of the model, and guess what? It's 0.99. So it has no effect really. So it is easier to communicate when you have your a full model, because you show the effect coefficient and you show, okay, it's very minimal, very small effect. So I believe we talked about all this. We covered. If you have questions on the all the trainings or what we, and I trust you have this. So we included the Phoenix project, so you have the whole thing you can open. So, and in the slides you had snapshots, but yeah, you have the real projects with final, with the bootstrap. And so that's when we corrected the trend and random effect. You have the SCM that was run. I even have a model where you have an interaction effect, basically different weight coefficient depending on your EM status, just showing you can code whatever you want. So yeah, that's all part of it. But I would like to spend a little bit more time on the communication of covariate effects. So depending on, okay, so yeah, that's communication. So and please, if you have a question, I'm not looking at the chat while screen sharing. Please speak up. So what happens is when you fit a model, the software, no matter what software, will give you a table, basically Ka volume, coefficient of EM on clearance, on patient status of volume and clearance. And it is very hard to put this into clinical perspective. So what does this mean? Is it like, okay, I have 1.25 to 25% higher? Okay, that's on volume. What's its impact on PK parameters that counts, like AUC or Cmax? So that's why we have this part of the lecture where we stress on the efficient communication of covariate effect. And I sent you a copy of the paper we published. So, okay, that's a tutorial. That's, yeah, I sent you this one, the ISOP one, but I also sent you my tutorial on forest plots. So basically, we wrote this tutorial where step by step we guide the user on, okay, how do you generate these forest plots step by step? Because we want to see if there is weight impact on AUC, not just clearance or volume. And basically, you can, sorry, I have the delay here. You can also show it on multiple parameters. So AUC, CLAS, and Cmax, and see if there is an impact depending on your model. So, so here in, I start with the Menon-Anderson paper. And also, before I forget, I also, in the chat, I showed you, I shared a paper by Francis Montré, a group comparing full model stepwise and SCM plus, which is a variation of the classical SCM, making it faster, more stable, and less, like we don't test the model twice, so you can read about it. But also in this paper, they reference effects and they make forest plot. So let me show it to you. And they have upset plot like Innocent is publishing hopefully soon. But what I want to show you, yeah, maybe it's in supplemental material, you can check it out. Okay, so that's being said, what we want is to tell people, okay, what's the meaning? It's the impact of our covariate on parameter of interest. So clinically, we are interested in AUCs and Cmax. So here I show example on how we can, yeah, I won't repeat the tutorial here, but you can look. So I've been working on this since like more than 10 years. We have a lot of interactions with FDA. So that's a newer FDA POP-PK guidance. So now they clearly mentions the forest plot by name and a framework on how to simulate. So that's how the package work, and it uses R to simulate from your model and to generate. So it guides you. And I hope you did some of this assignment so you practice and see how things work. But yeah, I would like to give Innocent some time to tell us about a little bit more, even newer method which are being tested in the field on machine learning, and how you can avoid SCM. Like we all know, it is highly inefficient. It is greedy. It has many statistical problems. So I would like to invite the Innocent to give his insights on how can we do variable selection in pharmacometrics using machine learning methods.
Thank you, Samir. But actually, if you have something else, you can continue, because I think time has moved. We have 20 minutes left, and yeah, I've made some presentations before in machine learning. I wanted to go into more detail into the different methods, more technical, but I don't think there is enough time for that. Unless someone has something specific to ask me about machine learning, why we need it. But yeah, I think we'll have to do it next time.
Sounds good. So in your experience, how can machine learning help us in a sense as compared to SCM or SCM plus?
So currently machine learning is for pre-screening, because yeah, so the challenge with what? So if you have very few covariates, then you can just use your clinical expertise and say, okay, this and this, or just have a full model and include all covariates if you know they are relevant. If there are few covariates, you can use you can try all possible combinations of the covariates. Of course, there are people who say that you increase bias by trying everything, but that's what some people, other people also suggest that you have to search all the entire space. But now, if you have very many covariates, then you have to find a way of pre-screening, and that's where machine learning comes in. So at the moment, it's not here to replace SCM or all the models which look at all the covariates. So like you just shared frame and the full covariate models. But so I tried running them, but with very many models, but then it's almost impossible. So there's also a limit to how many models they can, how many parameters or covariates they can handle. But with machine learning, some methods you can give thousands of covariates. But now then if you can use it to screen to a more manageable number, then you can use the traditional more tested methods. I hope that answers your question. I see Muila and okay.
Yeah, thanks. So so basically, in the case where you have say 5 covariates, it's super easy. But more and more we have like biomarkers, we have tons of genomics, omics. So you might end up having, I don't know, maybe 100 or hundreds of covariates. So it's impossible to test these in a stepwise framework. So what the machine learning pre-screening tool would help us say, okay, amongst your 200 covariates, these are the top 10 that you should investigate more. And then you bring this into more traditional method, full model, SCM, SCM plus, and you test it as usual.
Yes.
Otherwise, it won't be possible to test this 200 method. So I saw some So yeah, what I mentioned, if you believe your covariate independently influence PD through a different mechanism, yeah, you add it. But if you already accounted for through the PK, you don't add it. So that's why I gave you an example of skin and receptor. You need a real mechanism going on that you think independently from your PK, you can influence the PD component. And with a caution, because you have the same covariate acting on different aspects of the model. So yeah, that can be tricky to handle. So you need outside information based on physiology to be able to make sense of these models. Yeah. So any other questions or comments?
Okay. Yeah, I've got a question on the machine learning, how it's like how we can use it as a pre-screening tool for covariates. So my question is, do you use the machine learning like in the first place, use the machine learning to estimate PK parameters, and then from there that's when like it does the selection, or how do you go about it? Do you just pick the covariates independent of the PK and then it selects the most likely like the top covariates that you need to investigate, or how do you go about it? Like,
so the current implementation, so what we implemented was you first run a structure model with no covariates, but then you add between subject variability. So once you do that, then the model can output etas and thetas. And yeah, then you can use, now those are continuous outcomes. You can then run your machine learning methods on those. So we tested both on the etas and thetas, and the results were consistent. So the assumption here is that if a covariate has an effect on the theta, if a covariate has an effect on the thetas or etas, then it should be significant. But like I say, this is it's pre-screening tool. So if you run this, it should help you narrow down the set of covariates you're starting with. If you narrow down and then you're missing a covariate to be important, then you definitely need to add it back.
okay. Thanks. That makes sense.
Yeah, and a word of caution here. I want to stress that depending on what software you use, you need to be careful. For example, monoliths don't handle time varying covariate easily. You need to define it as a regressor. The monoliths interface force you into using special, say, models that you can't change unless you go into code. So you need to be aware of that. Same Phoenix interface, when you click buttons, has some built-in pre-conceived models, but yeah, if you need more, you can go into coding. So you need make sure you are using software right, and always reach out, ask question when you are not sure what's going on. I'm looking to see if there's any.
Francis and Cassius hands are up.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Cassius, then Francis.
Oh, thanks, Innocent, Samia, and the APT fellows. So I have a question regarding the inclusion of the covariate models when building the population PK model or the population PK and PD. So what are how often are these integrated into a drug development and regulatory submission? Because in most cases, for most of drugs, the focus is only on weight and age. So are they, yeah, I'm just trying to get the relevance of the covariate models in regulatory submissions. And The second one is, can a random effect not be explained by a covariate model? And in this case, it's like, when do one know or determine if the model does not be explained by the current covariates, of which like there will be a need for a genetic information like the metabolism? Yeah.
So as covariates, I would say the important ones always are, of course, body size, weight, age, because we need to know whether we need to adjust the dose based on your body weight or your age. Renal function, hepatic function, sometimes depending on application, food effect, race effect. So drug-drug interaction, say clearance is reduced by half, you need to take it into account. So these are the most common, like, and part of label, like whether, because we want to know, okay, do you take a drug with or without food? What is the dose for like general population? Do we need to adjust it by body weight or by age or by pediatrics? Do we have maturation going on? Depending on your renal function or hepatic function. And in some cases, it can be genotype dependent. But yeah, these are the most mostly used and relevant, as that you can find in drug labels clearly mentioned.
I see. So at the end, they're gonna choose the one that is going to feed most of the population. Let's say maybe there is an effect of food. The overall will be like, oh, it mustn't be taken in with food. And
yeah, sometimes bioavailability is highly dependent on with or without food, or so yeah, we need to advise the patient how to take the medication. So that was your first question. What was your second one?
oh, when do we need like a genetic information in some cases where like,
Yeah, so you may sometimes the unexplained between subject variability, say, even with covariate we have, still very high, say 50% or 60%. So so it is very hard to predict the peak in particular patient. So that's meaning, okay, maybe there is a covariate that we are missing. So was it genetic or else? So it's so variable. So yeah, still very hard to predict the peak in particular patient if we don't have data with this patient. So yeah, maybe genetic information can help you, but again, that's based on what you know about the metabolism, the polymorphism of implicated CYPs, or UGTs, or etc., or ATPs. But yeah, you need to think about the mechanism and what you know about the drug.
okay, thanks. I mean, I think you answered all those questions.
Francis?
Yes, thanks, Sami. In line with the submission from Innocent, yeah, so I think it's clear context machine learning is for covariate screening before the actual covariate analysis. And I think maybe for the benefit of some of us who have not used machine learning, I think would benefit from, taking us through, stepwise how the covariate screening is done per se, like you have shown with SCM, maybe an equivalent of in machine learning, this is how you would do the covariate screening before you highlight the covariate that would be useful. I think that would be appreciated. Thank you.
So remember my presentation on machine learning. So we showed you how it was done. We have a paper also on machine learning. Hopefully it will come out. So in the paper, we also share code for how we did the how we went through the entire process. So it's not very hard, but then you need to put in some time to understand exactly what's going on. But I think we can organize a session and probably take you guys through what we did. But yeah, and you can always reach out to me in case you really need some specific information.
It's been amazing science. I wonder whether we could save some time, somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes, and close on time for some logistics. Rita is with us now. So let's move towards closing up on the questions.
All right, yeah. I think Safa had a question on Bootstrap that Innocent answered. So yeah, I believe we can go with the page logistics.
I see Francis's hand is still up. So Francis, you want to have a last word?
Sorry, that was the previous hand up.
Yeah, before I give it over to Rita, I really want to say I enjoyed this session, and if you did too, then I don't know, put your videos on or give a nice round of applause. I think this already started with Maroti making a comment just before we took a break. In my view, this is how we should be doing these sessions. Samir, would you agree?
Yes.
So well done. Well done, Francis, and thank you for accepting the challenge that I gave you at short notice to make it more interactive. Well done, really. Rita, you want to take over?
Yes, I can. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Long time no see and hear. I just would like to give you an update regarding Page. So I'm working on getting you the documents for the visa ready, which means that we're talking about the invite letter, we're talking about the letter that confirms that part of that the trip is being paid off. This should also then cover the issues that some of you mentioned, that you need to provide bank statement that covers 30 euros per day, etc., etc. So just with these letters that we will provide, this all should be taken care of. I also work with getting your flight confirmations. These are not the definite ones, so I got some responses from you guys about changes, about information, and so if you clarify it, if you have other conferences that you want to attend either right before or right after Page within Europe, just let me know so that we can then make those adjustments once we do the final bookings, when you have the visa ready. On another note, I'm also working on getting you hotel accommodation. The hotel accommodation is a bit tricky, as most of the rooms or most of the hotels are not even sending me response back. So I'm involving now Shamima, whom some of you actually had contact with on your trip to Cape Town. She was the travel agent who provided the flights. So I'm working with her on getting you accommodation there. And we are also working on the payment information. For those of you who have not yet paid and are, because of that, still on the waiting list, we are working on getting the payments for the group all taken care of which would then also trigger the invite letter from Page, which is also something that you guys will need for the visa. So working on all of that. And speaking of which, I would like for you guys to get in touch with me by tomorrow evening if the visa letter that you had for Cape Town, if there has been any changes in that. And I'm not talking about the reason why we are inviting you. So it's not going to be the meeting in Cape Town, but Page in Rome. But the content of it, if the affiliation has been changed or anything like that, I would need to know that by tomorrow so that I can prepare the letters before I'm going on holidays. I'm away from next week, from Wednesday onwards for a week. I would like to send the letters, if possible, to you before that happens. So I need your confirmation that affiliations have or have not changed on that. Also, I would like to point out that not everyone has returned the signed stipends contract. There were some of them I had to make a correction. Those are in your mailboxes. Please return them to me ASAP so that we can then countersign it with Colin can actually countersign it and then have it returned to you as the completed document. Yeah, and I think that's it from my side. Colin, do you have anything else that you need to talk about or want to talk about?
Not really. Yeah, maybe I just add an apology that the honoraria letter came out so late, but I also wanted to highlight, well, I wanted to acknowledge Sitara, whose donation into the program allows us to pay the honorarium. I want to also highlight that the honorarium is not payment, it's not a salary. That's why we call it honorarium or stipend. It's intended for you to be able to then devote more than 50% of your time to actually working, to working on the project and working on this program. Arguably, you should be paying to take this course. But we realize that you know we selected you because you might be in full-time employment and you might need to take leave, or you might need to take unpaid leave or something like that, and this is why we pay the honorarium. I hope we can continue the course in the future and that we can continue to offer honoraria. But maybe, Rita, let's just throw it open in the 1 to 2 minutes if there's people have questions about the stuff that you said.
Yes, absolutely. So questions, anyone, comments? Something that isn't clear?
Say going once, going twice.
Okay, nothing else from anybody? That sounds great. Thank you, Davis. And
KCS has a question, I think.
okay, Cassius, yes.
Hi, Rita. Nice to meet you. So after you sent a message to, I think you replied to Susan on the email that she received the email from the page organizer saying she was being put on the waiting list, and you suggested that we all So I did that, and I received the message saying that my decision has been retrieved, back to like, yeah, registered member. So they said I should make a payment. So I've not been given like a certain time period to, yeah, they didn't specify like until what time I should make the payment. So I'm not sure if like you have reached out to them or do they know about us, because I've indicated
Yes.
that the Pharmacometrics Africa is the one who's gonna make the payment.
Yes, they know about you. So Colin has a contact with Paige. We've been in touch last year for the previous edition with Paige as well. And it's always a bit a discussion with the page organizers, because normally what they would want is that each individual person pays their fee individually, but we would want not to do that. We would prefer to do it in one go for the group. So we are discussing that. We are talking to Paige. They know about you. They have a list of you guys' names. So that, and then we are waiting for them to confirm, to get back to us on how to do the payment. And Colin is working on it, and I contacted the person as well.
But just in
Colin?
case they're a big organization and the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, KCS, feel free, or any of you, feel free to write to them if you get one of those notices, and then copy in Rita and say, I am part of the APT 2024 program, and all the payments are going to be done centrally.
Yes.
And maybe copy Rita and copy myself.
Yeah, we'll do so. Thank you for that.
Okay. Good. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I would have, I have a similar question to what Cassius did mention.
Yes.
I also initially did receive that email regarding having taken 14 days without payment and being on the waiting list. However, unlike Cassius, I've not received any email on me being put back onto the list and requesting me to make payment. So I don't know. I did send you this correspondence, Rita.
Yes.
I did send it to you. I don't know if there's something I should do, writing to Paige, or there's something you're initiating from your side, because you had requested for this email. I think you had requested it in the correspondence.
Yes. So basically, the standard correspondence from Pages. So you register for the course, and then they put you on the waiting list until the cost is paid, until the registration fee is paid, and as long as that is, and normally they put you on a 14 days waiting list, and normally then they would probably delete it. But since we already are in touch with them and we told them to hold on to your reservations, we are simply just waiting for the response to about our question about the payment for the group.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other items that you would like to have clarified?
Rita, I'll echo Davies' comment on the chat. Thank you for all the behind the scenes work.
You're welcome.
And KCS, Rita is even better when you meet her in person. Thanks.
Yes.
And Samir, Innocent, back to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. If other questions come up, please reach out, use Moodle. Let us keep discussing and see how we can use this method in our daily work. Innocent?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks thanks for Francis for leading this discussion, and yeah, thanks everyone for contributing. I hope we continue like this. So if you have any any technical issue, please always feel free to reach out. Some of these things like machine learning, it's best to understand when you are actually writing the code or seeing how things work. If I just gave you the theory, sometimes it's not as you won't learn as fast as if we actually went through a practical session. So, and the best way to learn is if you have a problem, reach out. You can always organize time and go through whatever you are facing. Thanks, everyone.
Before you go, before we close it, I see Casey still has his hand up. Casey, is there something new?
Yeah, sorry, I'm asking a lot of stuff. So regarding your message from yesterday that we shared that we should put our slides of presentation or updates on the module platform, I saw that no uploaded something, but I couldn't access the presentation. Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm the only one who cannot access their presentation.
You're talking about Noor's presentation on the discussion chat, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm also looking at the same thing, and thanks for looking at it. So Noor, my suggestion is actually that what you guys do is you put your presentations into your individual project team space. So this one here, there's a team space created for each of the groups. So Noor, maybe it should be that you put it in, where is it? It'll be here.
Yes, I tried to put it in the discussion, and
yeah, this might be the best place to put it.
Okay, okay, I will put it there.
And then, you know, again, if we have difficulties, we can behind the scenes also work out a good way in which we move it. My concern is that it's going to be all over the place on Moodle and we can't find it. But thanks for asking that question and for putting that up there, Noor. What I also want to ask is if you could all put your modeling plans before next week. Please put your modeling plans into your project team space. What I had done was, you must have seen this already. Let's see, I think it was somewhere here, March 21st session that Amira, no, it wasn't that one. You see, I'm struggling to find the correct thing anyway. After Amira's last announcement, which would have been April 4th live session. Oh yeah, there we go. I put this note, which I think all of you saw because I also took it and put it into the WhatsApp chat. So the modeling plan to start with, and then any pre-read meeting for next week's session. So I'm hoping that somehow next week's session is going to be as exciting as this week's session, that you would have by Wednesday, the previous day at least, or before that, put in some materials such that we can take a look and we can give you some considered opinions. Okay, with that, we are 8 minutes over time. Thanks, everybody. Let's close the session. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.